on Bloomberg TV and radio. Indeed, I'm Joe Matthew in Washington, and we're waiting to see something start here at the White House. When President Zelensky arrives at the West Wing, things will start to move pretty quickly. We've been through this 3 times already, of course. This is his 4th visit with the call for Tomahawk missiles, that not just Tomahawks as well, and also defensive weaponry to close the skies, as Zelensky likes to say. There's a live view, if you're with us on Bloomberg TV or on YouTube, of the West Wing entrance. When Zelensky arrives, President Trump will step out and welcome him inside, and then we'll be off and running with a bilateral meeting that will involve reporters, and we'll hear that and see it live and unfiltered here on Bloomberg. As we assemble our political panel with their take, and to the big questions, which Trump do we get, which Zelensky do we get today? We've seen 4 different versions of this, or we will have by the end of the day. The first 3 were different in very significant ways, and we're joined now by Bloomberg Politics contributor, Democratic analyst Jeannie Sheehan Zaino, democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center, alongside Republican strategist Lisa Camuso-Miller, the former RNC communications director and host of the great Friday Reporter podcast. Lisa, which Zelensky shows up today, and which Trump will greet him?
Oh boy, I mean, Joe, it's hard to tell. I think that both sides probably are feeling very optimistic. There's been a lot of good news as it relates to what's happening overseas in terms of negotiation conversations, open conversations. I think a lot of it will be tempered by how the call went yesterday with Putin. And that's, to me, also, there's so many variables that could take place here. I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful that it's a productive conversation, because it's one that needs to be had, and it's one that needs to keep the momentum going.
I have to admit, I'd be on time for this, Jeannie, if it were me. He's a half an hour late, and maybe that was in coordination with the White House. That we don't know. He's staying literally across the street at Blair House. Be curious to see if he walks or drives over. We can tell you, according to the press pool, by the way, that a military honor guard is waiting on the lawn, lined up along the driveway there to greet him. So he is not getting the red carpet, so to speak, but the same treatment as another world leader, Jeannie, which is a lot different than the feeling, at least, that we had on his first visit. Is this going to be contentious, collaborative? What's the vibe today?
Yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned the Blair House, because my understanding is this is the first time in one of these visits he has been able to stay at the Blair House, which several people are suggesting is a sign of respect. In the past, I think he's had to get one of those hotels in D.C. that we've all stayed at. So it's
a great point that you make, Jeannie. He was staying at the Four Seasons the night that the meeting went south, and forgive me for interrupting, but he has just arrived. There you see the 2 standing side by side at the West Wing portico. The president has got his arm around him, pat on the back. It looks, based on my view here, it's a little bit difficult to tell in the shadows that he's wearing the same black suit that he had on last evening, and they've just resolved inside the West Wing. So we'll be hearing from them a bit from now as the photographers follow them inside. Jeannie, it's an upgrade to get Blair House when you're used to staying in a hotel, even if it is the Four Seasons.
That's right. And listen, I love myself some Four Seasons, Joe, so I would stay there in a heartbeat. But the Blair House is an upgrade. So that, people are saying, is one sign that he may be looking forward to a meeting with more respect. But we never know. I mean, you and I were sitting here the first meeting, and, we probably thought it was going to be a regular meeting, and it turned into something other than any of us had ever seen. And of course, a big question is J.D. Vance, is the vice president there? It's hard to know. But, I do think on this Tomahawk issue, one thing, and I thought Ben's point was so well taken, the politics of this, I think, are even more critical than the strategy from a military perspective, because, of course, they already have the flamingos. They already have the ability to go into Russia and with a precision missile. And that hasn't changed the trajectory of the war. And most experts say that even if they got a limited number of Tomahawks, it wouldn't change the trajectory of the war. But it was enough to get Vladimir Putin on that phone call yesterday, which, to Lisa's point, is really critical here. And Donald Trump seems to have altered his thinking, maybe, in terms of both the Tomahawks and sanctions, with that bipartisan bill still hovering over. So Vladimir Putin and congratulating Donald Trump, they all know how to play him now. Zelensky in his suit today seems to have been able to speak his language on the sanctions and the Tomahawks to a certain extent so far.
Press pool is gathering right now, so we could be hearing and seeing them shortly. with more color from the pool. If you put yourself out there in the driveway, having just seen these two at the door together, the faint sound of music is emanating from the Rose Garden, what the president calls the Rose Garden Club. The soundtrack for this arrival, Chiquita by ABBA and Maria from West Side Story. Lisa, what will be the mood music for the meeting?
I don't know, Joe. Did you just hand me the auxiliary connection? I don't know, Joe. I mean, the whole thing to me is just bananas. Don't even get me started on the Rose Garden conversation. I think more than anything, though, it's a great sign. Jeannie makes an awesome point about the fact that he's at Blair House. Great conversation, great starting point that the two of them meet one another. They meet at the same point of view. They're dressed similarly. I mean, all of these sort of small moments that we're looking for some indication about how the conversation goes to show that there has been a tremendous evolution in this relationship. And that, to me, I think is encouraging. I'm encouraged by that alone. And so I'll be curious to see how this conversation goes. But this relationship is one that has been fraught with ups and downs. The other point Jeannie makes is very good. Who knows who's in the room? Is it the vice president? Is it someone else? Is it Pete Hegseth, right? So all of these pieces are really set to be played out today. We'll wait and see.
Or maybe Andrea Bocelli, who was in the Oval Office a short time ago, Jeannie. That Oval Office, as the president likes to call it, the greatest show on earth, is quite the staging area. And so this is going to play locally for President Zelensky as well. I mentioned he's going to hold a news conference, maybe an impromptu news conference out there in outside, presumably, the White House gates. He said he would do it in front of Blair House later on today. What's going to happen here following the meeting when both sides try to frame this to their own benefit? And how will it play locally for President Zelensky?
Yeah, and Joe, I'm glad you said they played Maria from West Side Story and not like I Feel Pretty or one of those. So I think Donald Trump
I can't say they didn't, but yeah.
Yeah, let's hope not. And I love West Side Story. But, I'm glad you raised the domestic issue because that is critical. And it's on both sides, of course, for Zelensky, who is facing his own real challenges at home. And also for Donald Trump. I mean, we had Marjorie Taylor Greene out in the last few hours talking about the fact that Donald Trump has taken his eye off the America First agenda with what she calls a revolving door of foreign policy leaders and less focus on things like you just had Lisa Abramowitz on talking about the economy, affordability, housing. And so these, the domestic issues are critical. And I'm going to be very curious to see if both Zelensky and Donald Trump can do anything to improve their standing domestically. Because, of course, when you see the MAGA folks starting to cry foul when Donald Trump is focusing too much on foreign policy, that is a sign that he needs to get back to the business of the government, which is in its 14th, 15th day of a shutdown. And of course, again, Zelensky has his own challenges at home.
Day 17, Jeannie, and nobody's talking about it. You're the
It's
first
worse than
person
I
I think maybe I said something this hour. It is interesting how we go from one to the next, but that's what Flooding the Zone is all about. We have less than a minute left, Lisa. What are you going to be watching when the cameras open up and we see these two sitting there? What are you watching for? Is it like Jeannie said, who's on the other couch?
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. I'm looking for who's on the other couch and I'm looking for body language. Look, I'm a communications person by trade, Joe, so I'm always looking for those nonverbal cues. How did it go? How did this early conversation, when they walked in the door, what did the president talk about? How did it go? Who greeted him? There's so many. I mean, that's why we're here on the political panel, because we love to evaluate all these little ins and outs. And so for me, I'm really looking for that early body language and who else is in the room.
Yep. Excellent. It's going to be the cabinet room, by the way, and we're going into overtime here because we're just now watching reporters enter the room. We want to make sure they get the microphone straight. Everyone's standing against that wall. This is the long cabinet room table. There you see it on Bloomberg TV. And once the president gets started here, they've got the boom mics out. We will get up and rolling here. Jeannie was asking the question, of course, who is in the room? And we're getting a sense of that now. J.D. Vance is sitting right next to the president at his right, and Marco Rubio at his immediate left, with the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, and the Treasury Secretary the next seat over. These are typically the sort of assigned seats that we see at meetings like these. President Zelensky in the White House. If you're joining us right now on Bloomberg TV, these are live pictures as we wait for this conversation to begin. There's no telling how long it will go or what questions will be asked, but we do have the press pool in the room, and we start now with live coverage here on Bloomberg TV and radio. Here's President Trump.
As